In this video, we're going to be solving question 30 of 2021 Junior Mathematics Olympiad first round. So the question goes like this. The radius of a circle is increased by 1 cm. By how many centimeters is its circumference increased? The most straightforward way of going about this question is to just assume the radius of a circle to be something initially, find what the circumference will be, and then increase the radius by 1, find what the new circumference will be, and take the difference. But yeah, that's like a good way of going about it in an exam. That's what you should do. But I will do it that way, and then I'll also go about this question in a different way. So let's start. So let's say that the radius of a circle initially is, let's say k. So if the radius of a circle is k, then the circumference of that circle is going to be, the formula for circumference is 2 pi r. So the circumference of a circle in this case will just be 2 pi k. Right? And then if you increase the radius by 1, then the new radius is going to be k plus 1. And when the radius of a circle is k plus 1, the circumference is going to be 2 pi into brackets k plus 1. So yeah, this is what we have. And then since we're trying to find out how much the circumference changes if we increase radius by 1, the change in circumference now, so the change is going to be 2 pi into k plus 1 minus 2 pi k, and this is going to be 2 pi k plus 2 pi minus 2 pi k. Notice we have two 2 pi k's here, so this 2 pi k will cancel this one here, and you'll be left with 2 pi. So the change in circumference of the circle when you increase radius by 1 is going to be 2 pi, and that means that option A is the answer. But I will go about solving this question in a different way now. Okay, so for this method, we're going to work with the idea that that the ratio of the circumference of a circle to the radius is constant. So so what that means is that if you have two circles, like in any circle at all, if you divide the circumference of that circle by the radius of that circle, the value you have will be constant. So let's Ri represents the radius of a circle at a point, right? So this, I'll just call this initial radius. And then Ci represents the circumference of the circle with this initial radius. And then we'll also have Rn. This is going to be the radius of the circle when Ri is increased by 1. So I'll call this new radius. Then we have Cn. This is going to be the circumference of that circle of the new circle whose radius is one bigger than the other circle. That's the initial radius, right? So this is the new circumference. So since we know that the ratio of the circumference of a circle to the radius of that circle is constant, that means that Cn over Rn is going to be equal to Ci over Ri. Thus, the ratio of the circumference of the new circle to the radius is going to be equal to the ratio of the circumference of the initial circle to the radius. And at this point, we're going to make use of an interesting thing. I don't know if I'll call it an identity or so. So the thing I'm going to make use of is this. So if you have that A over B is equal to C over D, then this is also going to be equal to A minus C divided by B minus D. So I think this has a name, but I can't remember the name right now. But yeah, this is what we're going to make use of here. So since we know that Cn over Rn is equal to Ci over Ri, that means that this is also equal to Cn minus Ci divided by Rn minus Ri. So now we have this equation here. Then finally, the radius of the circumference of a circle to the radius is actually 2 pi, right? So since we know that the ratio of circumference of a circle to the radius is equal to 2 pi, and we have Cn over Rn here, this is the ratio of the circumference to the radius of that circle, means that this whole equation here, that's all these three terms we have here, are all equal to 2 pi. So we'll have Cn minus Ci over Rn minus Ri equals 2 pi. So we're now going to be working with just these last two these last two terms of this chain of equations, right? So we have, let me just write this again, Cn minus Ci over Rn minus Ri equals 2 pi. And then Rn minus Ri. Remember, Rn is the new radius. That's Rn is the radius when you just add, is the value you get when you just add 1 to Ri. And since Rn is 1 bigger than Ri, that means Rn minus Ri is 1. So that means that Cn minus Ci over 1 equals 2 pi, which means that Cn minus Ci equals 2 pi. Now at this point, remember that Cn is the circumference of the circle when you increase radius by 1, and Ci is the initial circumference of the circle. Since Cn minus Ci is 2 pi, that means that when you increase radius of the circle by 1, the circumference of that new circle minus the circumference of the original circle you had is going to be 2 pi. That's the difference between the circumference of the new and the old circle is going to be 2 pi. And yeah, we still get the same answer that you get if you go about it in this first way. So yeah, those are two ways of solving this question. But if you're in an exam, you want to go with the first method. But I just talked about the second one to just illustrate something. So that's how to go about solving this question.